Thank you. All good tips. Thank you so much for joining us. I can see you're all ready to join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We apologized as we came in, but I'll reiterate that we apologize for keeping you waiting as executive session took longer than we anticipated. Betty, if you would kindly let the record reflect that the board met in executive session to consider collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, discussions regarding proposed pending or current litigation, and matters leading to the appointment or employment of a particular person or corporation. Our first action is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Questions? Do I have a second? I didn't ask for the second. I still need a second on the approval of the minutes. Thank you. All in favor?
I abstained because I was absent for that meeting.
Thank you.
I'll abstain as well.
Okay, I think we still have enough. All in favor? You good? And next we'll move on to the report of the superintendent, Dr. Giarrazzo.
Thank you very much. Okay, so since our last meeting, which I feel like this meeting kind of crept up on us fairly quickly, we've been spending a lot of time on the upcoming bond. I've been meeting with folks in small groups. We've been providing information about the scope, about the rationale for the projects, about finances related to the upcoming project. So we've had a few stops and starts related to the holidays, and that's caused this to simply fly by, but we are getting a lot done. A few things for the board and the community. Please be on the lookout for surveys related to district committees for residents and for staff. Those are forthcoming. We have homecoming planned for October 16th. Carnival begins at 10 a.m. and we'll play Mineola in the afternoon. We've got lots of various games and activities planned between 10 and 1 o'clock. New this year is a virtual reality booth for students. So come on by, I'll be cutting the line. I wanted to give the board an update on PSAT testing that's happening next week for all 10th and 11th graders. Last year we had a conversation in a public meeting about what students are doing on those days when they're not taking the tests, and we asked you for some time to think through how we might be able to provide for more purposeful programming. And so we have full and complete programming for all 9th and 12th graders, including a documentary on the solar system and T-building activities in the afternoon for all the freshmen. Seniors will take part in various workshops on college interviews, Common App, writing the college essay, developing your resume, and then in the afternoon there is a full grade presentation on maintaining healthy relationships called Break the Cycle. So I did want to give a very sincere thank you to Albert Cousins and Don Lang and Dan Doherty for their responsive and thoughtful planning. This week we hosted George Couros, who is the author of Innovator's Mindset, and so the board has, we're pleased to give the board copies of those books. He worked with our teachers on fostering an innovator's mindset within themselves and their students. Have a read. It's not a super complicated read. I want to thank Chris Zublionis for putting the day together. We also hosted teams from the Roslyn schools, Syosset schools, Franklin Square schools, and East Meadow schools. It was really, really a terrific day. We started the day with the various teams from other districts. We then spent time just with our administrative team, and because we are reading that book, that is a common reading for all of our teachers and all of our administrators this year to work that through. And then in the afternoon, for the first time, I think in a long time at least, said you're here 11 years, right? And that's never happened. But we brought all of the teachers over to the high school for a common Monday meeting for a little over an hour with George Couros, and it was really super well received. So we hope to do some more of that moving forward, but it was a great use of time and a really nice focus on the strategic plan and the goals. So good job, Dr. Z. Lastly, I want to wish our seniors good luck right? So you are busily putting your early apps together, right? Your early decisions together. I will tell you that I am the father of a high school senior, and so I am definitely feeling your pain, and the pain of your parents, I'm sure. So definitely hang in there. It's coming soon. And then very lastly, I just wanted to wish a happy New Year to all of our community who's celebrating the Jewish New Year. We have Columbus Day coming up next week, and Thanksgiving will be here before we know it.
So true.
So thanks so very much.
And to your point, right, on the PSAT day, the practice interviews, I thought was
Yes.
a great addition. And the Innovators Mindset is a great reason to follow North Shore Schools on Twitter, where they were live tweeting
Yes.
throughout the day. So if you haven't managed to sign up yet, that's a great reason. And thank you.
You're welcome. And we are using we're trying to use a common hashtag. So hashtag North Shore CSD. And so if you search that hashtag, you will find we're trying to get our teachers and our administrators putting that hashtag in anytime they tweet something, so that will start to tell the district's story in one central location.
Plus really cute pictures of kindergartners doing sciencey art things. And
Awesome.
You should
Yes.
follow it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We move on to the report from our SGO representatives.
Okay, so SGO has been working on some stuff for homecoming. We are deciding to sponsor fan gear and spirit items for SGO to hand out to fans. So like foam fingers and pom-poms and stuff like that. We've also decided, because SGO meetings can get a little hectic with everybody screaming out ideas, so we decided to have people from SGO fill out a form so they can propose their ideas in a more formal manner. And so we will bring up the forms during the SGO meetings so people can propose their ideas.
It's a good idea.
And also today, prospective freshman SGO board members delivered their speeches to the freshman class, and voting will take place, has taken place today and will continue until tomorrow morning electronically.
Great.
Also, junior and senior class board members have expressed interest in an intramural football game. So they're working on planning it with class advisors. And we're thinking, what was it, around homecoming?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Okay, so I think we're going to plan it for homecoming day.
It's fun.
And that's all for this
Great.
meeting. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Trustees, feel free to stay or go. It's entirely up to you.
Thank you.
I heard there's something called, what do you call it?
Homework.
Work?
Home.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Or
Okay.
home.
Trustees, that's going to bring us up to our discussion in which we have some reviews coming up so that we can have a sort of top-level review of where it is you're looking for the district to go. And then we're also going to talk about scheduling our own discussion items.
Correct.
I give it to you.
Thank you. We'll just get to where I need to be here. And it's in the tab called Board Meeting Topics. Shocking.
Crazy.
Right. All right. Yeah. It was hiding from me. Okay, so we in the board's letter this week, we sent home a tentative board meeting schedule, topics for discussion. At the last board meeting, the board asked me to put together a presentation on our wellness efforts with a focus on vaping in particular. And then we have later in the year, we have an external math review that we will get the results of that on. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity for the board to give us direction on not necessarily the result, but what do you want to know through these discussions, right? So, and then that helps me to then go back and talk with our administrators on how to structure the presentations. We know that we want the presentations to be more succinct, and so we have given that feedback to the team. We've said to them, we really do need you to keep these at the maximum within a half an hour, because they have gone on a little long, but
And we want time to go on afterwards.
fair.
Right, yeah.
Right. So they end up, just, being very long. So if I can just take the board through the topics that we've laid out for the year, then I can take some of your direction on that.
So we're gonna work off this.
We'll work
You're
off-
saying.
yes.
And when we get to wellness, we'll talk about wellness, or,
We can do it that way. That
that's
works
what, I'm just
perfectly
asking
fine.
how you want to do it.
Your pleasure.
Topics first and then go circle back to the math and
Let's
the
do it that
wellness?
way, maybe.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Topics first.
All right, so topics first. So October 24, we need to get back to circle back with the board on the literacy review.
Mm-hmm.
And so Deborah Small and Amy, not Amy. Thank you, Julie Ritter. Under Chris's direction, we'll bring back the results of that and our plans for moving
Right.
forward. The board has that report, so have a look at that before the meeting. Typically, the board has done 3 nights on student achievement, one at the elementary level, one at the middle level, one at the high school level. And so that's a lot of meeting time that you devote to those reports, and they become sort of very silo-y. So Chris and I got to thinking about how could we shape this in a way that might give the board an opportunity to see a K-12 picture, because we have really been focusing on that as a district, right? How do we think like a system? How do our curricular areas tie from K through 12? What's the math story, writing story, things of that nature? So on December 12th, I'm proposing that we do a district report on student achievement, K-12, technology, STEAM, and then tying in fine and performing arts to that discussion, because it'll become more clear why we've done that. There are some interesting things happening that relate very nicely to our STEAM work.
Okay.
On January 9th, I'm proposing that we do a K-12 report on student achievement in humanities and world language. So we could, yes.
I was just going to say, and then I think we should pause for a second, because it's a really, I think it's a very interesting change, but it's absolutely a change from the 3 nights where we do elementary, middle school, and high school to switch to 2 nights and doing it K-12 and breaking up in these 2 ways. Do you guys have any questions about that?
I like the idea very much. I think it's important to show the progression in subject matter from K through 12, because that's the way our children and our students experience the district, as opposed to a building doing everything and then something else. They're here for the long haul. And so I'm very much in support of this. I like the idea of reducing it to 2. I like the idea of having more control over it. Keeping it at those 4 academic subject matters, I'm wondering how you're going to incorporate other forms of achievement. Student recognition, participation in clubs and activities that were featured as part of those, the overall wellness of our students beyond just the 4 academic areas.
Yes? Okay. So
It seems worth addressing.
Okay.
I would say, yeah, go for it.
So yes, what we would do is we would take a look at those components of the program, right, and fold them in topically, right. So there will be opportunities for us to, because what I think is helpful for the board is to expand this discussion beyond just what are the test scores, right?
Yes.
So the test scores are important, and we have an obligation to make sure that we report that out to you in the community. And there's a lot of good news involved in the test scores, but there is a lot about North Shore education that extends beyond just the test scores. And so we want to be able to communicate that to the board, particularly because we do a lot of work in process skills. We do a lot of work with our SVOs. We're doing some interesting things by way of assessment. We're doing some interesting things in professional development to support this work with our teachers, and even with students, right? So I think it's a good opportunity for us to really think through what is the lens. We've tried to do that over the past couple of years. What is the lens of achievement that's beyond just, the Regents exams, AP exams, which are all hugely important, but not the only way to measure achievement.
I feel very hopeful about it, and I don't feel like you necessarily have to do it exactly one way year after year. You can do it this way, and if you decide you're missing a piece on the building level and you want to do it a different way in some particular year, you can.
Yep.
Do you guys have any other thoughts on this? They're good. All right.
Okay, great. In January, after that, we think it's really time. We've done a lot of work with the shared valued outcomes over the past 2.5 years that I've been here, and particularly in the area of progressions and what do they mean and how do we assess them and how are they being used in the classroom. And they are such a core component of our program that we believe that it's time for a board discussion to say, where have we come over the course of time? What was with regard to the SVOs? Where are we with them? And what is our plan for the future? In February, I'll present the superintendent's budget, and then we'll then have a discussion on time, right? So we're looking at how we use time in each of the levels. So we are looking at how to incorporate some kind of block schedule, if that is possible, at the high school. How we are structuring the day at the elementary level, what kids are doing, how are they, at what points in time do we have them engaged in play-based activities, school-wide enrichment, FLES, all of that. How do all those pieces fit together? And then one of the inquiries that we have, in particular for older students, right, so the research is very, very clear. We're actually sort of getting at time wrong in K-12 public education, right? Anything you read, if you have a teenager at all, they tend to like to sleep. And so we tend to bring them to school while it's dark out in the morning. So is there an opportunity for us to think about when we start school for older people versus younger people? I don't know. How does that interplay with all of the things that have to happen, including extra classroom activities, athletics, right? So you have to figure out what's, if the day can start later, what's the latest it can be, and still be able to travel for away games and all of those things. So we're not anywhere with it. We haven't drawn any conclusions. We haven't made any plans. We just think it's a good time for us to have that honest, open discussion about how are we using our time. And by the time we get to March, it gives us enough time to do that work, come to the board with some recommendations that you'll then be able to, kick around a little bit and then have in time for building if there are changes that need to be made that may or may not inform the budget process. Okay? Okay. We have an audit discussion on the external audit later in the year, and then in May we're proposing an external review of the math review. That's all coming together now in terms of questions to inform the RFP. And then at the end, by the time you know it, we'll have the end of May will be my end of year report, and then we'll do tenure and retiree recognition.
And the end of the year report addresses our progress on the goals.
Correct. In between January and so I will start talking with the board in January about budget drivers, budget priorities, the budget calendar, the general overview of the budget. And then essentially every meeting after that, starting in early January, will have a budget component of the way we have done it over the past couple of years, right? So it was that first meeting in January was, here's where I am with it, here are the things that are driving it. It's at a very high level. At the end of January, we give
And
you.
is that where you also want to hear the board's
We're gonna do that
priorities on that?
sooner.
Or when do you want to do that?
I'm going to want to do that probably within the next meeting or so with the board.
You don't have much on November 7th.
So I'm happy to do that on November 7th.
Does that work for you?
It sure does.
Last year was November 29th, so
November 7th.
we
November
works.
7th
we
it
potentially
is.
could be ahead of the game.
Do you
That
have
would be
thoughts
great.
about your budget priorities, trustees?
Okay, so we will add that.
And then, so you're saying the line-by-line discussions, last year we divided the budget really just into two large chunks, but then
Yeah.
we left a third meeting in case we had to circle back to something, yes?
We did, last year we did February 7th, we did a bunch of categories. February 28th, we had a lot of the instructional lines. And then March 14th, we did staffing and benefits and debt service. And then that gave the board an opportunity to give us some feedback all along the way, right, that we made those adjustments as we went
Okay,
along.
so you think roughly on that time frame is
I think that
February
makes,
6th, February 27th, maybe March 5th
Yeah.
meeting?
yeah,
Okay, will be sections of the budget. Clear your calendars. What?
pardon me.
I said clear your calendars.
Clear
and
your
I pretended
calendars.
I didn't say it.
Okay. So that's a sort of a rough thinking of the year.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Trustees, other things we're overlooking, things you want to run differently,
I just had a question.
please?
I think a few meetings ago, you said that you were going to be doing an internal review of athletics, and is that still happening, and is there going to be a report on that?
I had a conversation too, right, because we had to talk about the, having an athletics committee meeting, but I also thought possibly it was, I didn't know if it was folded under the wellness discussion, was there, because I thought within the goals, there was something that addressed sort of phys ed and wellness, and so I wasn't sure how all these pieces were coming together.
so we haven't dedicated a specific night to doing that reporting out. The work will happen in the athletic committee that I'll chair with, that I'll co-chair with Don Lang. And there'll be some report, would be a written report to the board on the status of that. But we haven't, the committee hasn't even formed yet, so we have to form and then put together a structure for how that would look
Okay.
and come together. Okay.
Other, David?
Last year, we did a very thorough review of policy, but it got a little crunched at the end.
Yes, it did.
So, yeah, like, I think just 2 meetings ago, we finally wrapped up and.
We're still not done.
So the question is, I don't know if last year was a particularly ambitious year because of the ones we covered and because we had a policy service assisting us, or if we see less this year, but we're only doing the 6 series this year. So tell me your vision for that and how you see that being covered in these meetings.
Okay, so last year, you're absolutely right. Last year, we had the new policy service, and we took on probably, we probably took on a little more than we should have, taking on 2 sets of series in one year, particularly when we took on all the student
Well, those were
policies.
substantial.
Yeah, we probably, and my thinking in doing that was that I didn't want to elongate that discussion over the course of 2 years. So while we were doing students, we should probably look at instruction. So I tied those together, but it gave the board a lot to do. And some of those policies required a lot of follow-up, a lot of discussion. And so if I were to do it again, I probably would split them. But hindsight is 20/20. moving forward, the 6,000 policies are the financial policies, which are in pretty good shape from what we can tell. They've been reviewed by the external service. And so we will start to bring that to the policy committee, and what we will, I think there will be, my suspicion is that there will be fewer changes to those policies. And what we will do a better job of this year, what I will do a better job of this year, is making sure that the board gets them all throughout the year. Because we had laid out, when the policy committee met, we laid out a really terrific, aggressive plan where we had hoped to be done with 4,000s by like December, and then the 5,000s. Like, we had a really good plan, and then life got in the way of
Thanks.
of
So we can
making
expect
that
to
happen.
see a handful, it's a small
Yes.
handful of policies at meetings routinely.
all
is
throughout the
what you're
year
saying.
is what I'd like to see happen.
When will we first start seeing them? Because
Well,
again,
the policy-
November 7th, there's nothing there except our new budget
There will
priorities.
be nothing on November 7th by way of policy, I promise you.
Why not? We can put it right there. You got time.
There will be no,
You can just do a couple.
I doubt it.
I think it might be
To the
fun.
extent that they are, ready, you will have them.
So the other issue with just, I hear what you're saying about last year was a lot and it was late and it was substantial. The flip side, historically, the board has tried to review all the policies on a 3-year cycle. I don't know to what extent we were successful, but that was what we said we were trying to do. Doing just the 6,000s would put us more on like a 9-year cycle, right? Which seems a little long.
Not necessarily, right? Because the 7,000s, I think, are the facilities lines, right? I think those are the
Yes,
facilities
there's
codes.
facilities,
right?
absolutely.
So those are also some heavy duty ones. So now that we have the policy service in place, we should be able to do a better job of accomplishing that.
So what would you see as the
I can map it
schedule?
out for you.
I think we should do that.
I can map it out. And
Because
if,
I don't think we want policies to get to 9 years. It doesn't have to be 3, but I think we want a
yeah, I think
long-term
that's,
plan.
yeah, I think I can map that out for you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I look forward to
Just
reviewing them.
make a note so I don't forget.
Take your time. I will too.
Okay, so I'm
Dr.
gonna,
Z's over there jotting it down too.
he is,
Yes.
thank you, sir. Okay. So we have a little space like on April 23, maybe. Something may well come up between now and then, even on November 7th. So I'm interested if the trustees think there's anything else that they want to be able to spend a little time on that we've overlooked or forgotten about in some way. You'll cover a tremendous amount in your report at the end of the year on the goals. I wanted to know if there was any chance you wanted to look at something in the interim, like the evidence-based research practices that we've had sort of kicking around for a little bit prior to the end of the year report. It's an example. Some of the stuff in the goals is very, very new, right? It's not going to be done until you get to that. Correct.
But I was wondering if there was that, or if anyone had something they felt like we'd asked for reviews about, but we had just really lost track of. Anything we're forgetting? By April 23rd, I'm sure something will come up.
And it's,
Are you good with the discussions then?
yeah. Okay. And it's probably good to leave yourselves a little bit of wiggle room, so you don't end up with multiple thick discussion items on a single night. So if you know you have November 7 and the April meeting available to you, you have some wiggle room that if something comes up, you could give us some direction to place it there.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
You want to talk about math, or you want to talk
Sure.
about?
So we have the wellness discussion that's coming up in November, and then the math review that's coming up in at the end of the year. So I can take them in any order that you like, but I'll just take some notes on what is it that you want to know, and then we'll structure the presentation around your desires, so we don't have to guess
What we want?
about it.
We can
Yeah.
do math or wellness first. Whoever first has a comment will determine which we do first.
I just have
Trustee?
a quick question. It's more educational from the perspective of maybe the Wellness Committee. Over the past few years, did any ideas or come up from the Wellness Committee in terms of what that committee thinks you might want to review or pay attention to, focus on in terms of improvement for our kids, for their both physical and social, emotional, mental health, wellness?
They certainly had a number of discussions. I would say they put a lot of work into the wellness policy, and I would say if anything, they would want to make sure we were following that policy, that would be important. And then, yes, I think there's a lot of talk about stress, anxiety. That's definitely been a concern. Joanna, do you think over the past few years?
You pretty much covered it. I'm hoping we take some new directions here because there are new directions to take. And I think from the standpoint of some of the wellness issues in terms of vaping and what have you, there'll be some discussion. But we spend a lot of time on nutrition, policies, food in schools, trying to get ourselves together with the national policies. So it was really that kind of discussion. And there was a lot of follow-up each meeting as to those issues. So I'm hoping we can expand this year. The first meeting was rescheduled. I believe it's at the
Yes.
so.
And athletics is also part of that committee as well, so the same sort of education that could go towards
It's really,
athletics.
No, athletics
it's
is not
really
part of it.
not.
Athletics
yeah.
is se-
Not?
No, athletic,
Because nutrition, I think, would be another avenue by which, through the phys ed health curriculum and also via coaches.
through the health program, yes, through the cafeteria, right? A big
Right.
chunk of it's the cafeteria, but the athletics program per se has not been part of it.
There's
And in-
representation on the committee.
Yes, absolutely. And in part because there have been other athletic
representation
committees.
From athletics and physical education.
the athletics director
Yeah,
was chair of the committee. One of the physical education teachers was on that committee. One of the middle school, elementary school, the middle school physical education teachers were on that committee.
Health and health.
So there is representation.
Okay.
any other parameters you guys want to talk about when we have our discussion on November 21 about wellness?
I would think some education for us in terms of how counseling is provided to our students on an ad hoc basis when they're in the middle of maybe a crisis. So not necessarily chronic, but, in the occasion.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And, those children who we've identified, because we do have IEP students, and then kids who just need to come in for some support, incidental support. Even just, a report on the menu of what we provide our kids from the guidance department and the social workers, K through 12.
I think, Sarah,
Go ahead.
I'd also like to see some coordination of effort. I think there are lots of good things going on, but I believe that if we don't start looking at this issue with a long-term plan of a K through 12 approach, it's patchwork, and that is, as an educator, it's just very disturbing to me that we're not saying, here's the start, here's where the school social worker fits in, here's where the wellness teacher fits in. Can we develop some, or get some curriculum that we can use both through K through middle school that will address some of the issues that we have regarding drug use in the community? So I'm looking to kind of tie this all together. I think there are lots of good things going on, but it seems a little scattered to me.
There is a lot of good stuff going on.
There is.
And I think this sort of like crisis that's going on with vaping sort of points at like,
Well,
do
and
we
it's
have the
not,
structure that lets us respond to sort of like public health issues, whether it be anxiety and depression or whether it be something that arises more quickly?
But I think that reaction is, I think what happens is that we are reactive rather than proactive. So what has been
Just
happening is we
maybe
have a
more
crisis and we do programming, we do this, and we do presentations to kids, and it's got to be fuller than that. It's got to be more sequential.
well,
That's-
go ahead. Go ahead.
I've said this 500 times, so.
Right, and it is not, I would disagree that it is scattered right now. It has been we've been very intentionally over the past couple of years building a foundation and approach. And so putting the health and wellness teacher into play through the budget, we hope to expand that. Putting the elementary counselor into place is something that we hope to expand. The curriculum work was built last summer. So I agree with it.
So let's make
I
that part of
I
it.
totally agree with the
Let's just part of that.
direction, but it is not. It's part of a plan.
I
I'm not-
believe
okay.
the state curriculum has been out for, I think was articulated 2 years ago. The articulation, that's not to say, we've done all of it and
Right.
created all of it. But I do recall, I think, did Dan Doherty, the new director, I did read a document, I think, that you provided for us about a month or so ago.
Yes.
With his plan with the new elementary. So it's in there. It's in our Dropbox. I know it because I read it. But it would be nice to hear from either them or a summary, a report for that
Absolutely.
evening, how it's the hows.
I apologize for the word scattered. It feels disconnected to me.
Okay.
And that's what I'm looking for.
We know what we'd like to achieve and but how are we doing it? In what fashion? What structure?
How does it
That's yep.
not get stranded between counseling and phys ed, right? And how does it
Yeah, I
all
think
pull together is what?
that would benefit us as a board, benefit the community to hear the holistic approach, see it all laid out there, and it would just put all the pieces together for us. I think that would be really, really beneficial. I had
makes
two specific things about the vaping that I'd like to see covered. Number one is we've talked a lot about vaping detection systems, which have gone from being somewhat ineffective to being more ubiquitous around the country in schools. I think it's no secret to anybody, certainly up here and probably out there, that there is vaping in our buildings, as there is in every school building, probably in the country. But I'd like to see specifically what the district's approach to those vaping systems is.
Yep.
And the second thing
And the
is,
community would
yeah,
like to hear it.
absolutely. Second thing is, recently, and this is just a new thing, but I'd like to hear an opinion from legal counsel. There are now 3 school districts suing the Juul company, and one of them is here on Long Island. There's one in Kansas and one in
Village.
Missouri.
Three Village.
Three Village. I'm certainly not saying that we should be leading the train to do that, but I'd like to hear what our legal department, what our counsel has to say about that.
Okay.
I would like to hear, we make sure we're clear about what we're going to do with Bob Harris this year. And whether there's any interest in using it if we're doing sort of substance abuse issues with that every other year, it would make any sense to do some other kind of survey in
Of
the
the off
alternate
years.
years that goes more directly at anxiety, depression, you know, the other real risk factors in
Okay.
our students' lives.
Okay.
I don't have a sense of the cost or
Yeah, I don't either, but I can
it is
find
the
out.
loss of a class period, you know, there are reasons, but on both sides. So I would be sort of interested in a good long-term plan on staying on top of where our students are and how that's changing.
Got it.
I would agree. Since I was not on the board at the time that the Bach Harrison was delivered to the students, could we get a copy of
Yes,
it?
I have it. Yes, I can do that.
Of the
Okay,
results? Is that what you're asking?
I'd like to see the I'd like to see the
Survey.
survey
The
instrument.
what we gave them last time.
And the results wouldn't be terrible. but
I
I'd
have
like to see
everything.
the
I can-
survey
The
instrument.
results by misplacement
Yeah.
survey.
Okay. So I will say to you, you have a very broad scope that
We're worried.
worries me in terms of getting this done in a cohesive way within a 30-minute time limit. But let's percolate on this a little bit, and we'll try to put a scope together that makes some sense.
Yes. It's a timely issue.
Yes,
And that puts
absolutely.
the pressure on what to cover.
And it's important, and so we'll kick that can around a little bit and be ready for November 21.
Anyone else want to pile on onto wellness? But since he's already expressed, we've said too much. Okay, math. Top level, what is it you're interested with math? Mr. Mann,
Yeah, I'd like to see a few things.
please.
I'd raised this issue before, if there's some way of figuring out how it impacts the math program in particular at the middle school impacts other programs, and looking at the extra period, I guess, that's spent every other day. I think that's how it works.
Yes.
And how that's impacting other programs. Also, what other comparable school districts are accelerating students so that they're taking the algebra regents in 8th grade, and comparing that to, as I said, similar type school districts, and whether they are also adding that additional period every other day.
Okay.
And will there be a survey of parents that's done? And
Yes.
and if there could be a question concerning outside support and tutoring, and whether or not their child's getting tutoring.
Great. You good?
I'm good.
This side of the table, do I have anyone on math?
I have a question.
Please?
Who are we having, have we decided who we're having to do the external math?
No. So in Chris's update this week, he listed out the research institutions that.
Right, Carol had
I
like,
saw that, but we haven't made a
two-
decision.
No,
yet.
not at all.
Yes.
No, so what we'll do is right now, just to let you know where we are in the process, right now what we are doing is developing the scope of the RFP and the questions that we want the external reviewer to answer. And so this discussion tonight helps us to inform that RFP. That will go out to a whole bunch of places, then we'll collect them, and then we will evaluate the quality of the RFPs. But no, absolutely not. We have not. We haven't determined who will do. We don't even know who we want to do it at this point.
Well, the reason why I raise it is that the concern has been in the past, and I'm glad that you're looking at research institutions, is that it's really been largely, many of the times, you know, other superintendents from other districts, and it didn't really feel impartial examination.
I understand.
math?
Can I just add one thing? With regards to the accelerating students, what's happening after 10th grade? Once students have taken Algebra 2, are they actually going on to higher level math, or have we accelerated them so that they're just ending their pursuit of math studies earlier than they would have otherwise.
All right, Tim's stealing all my questions, so I'm going to have to cut him off. For my part, I want that sort of top-level thing. I'm not sure how to describe it, but sort of like, to what extent, right, at the end of all of our 12 years, like, to what extent do we have kids that like math, or successful at math, or engaged with math? Like, to what extent we create citizens that do not say that they hate math, that they're not good at math, right? Like, so, right, do they take 4 years of math in high school, or do they stop? Do they go on to study math in college, right? Do kids choose to take extracurricular activities that involve math, and to what extent that is available even to our youngest children?
Right.
Because I do think, and again, to Tim's point, that you want to look at math in more than just the vacuum of like our curriculum, like how does it extend to extracurriculars? How does it extend to summer, right? Do we have a summer slide problem? Do we need to be looking at that aspect of it? And likewise, how we treat math impacts those other subject areas.
Sarah, and to supplement that also, there has been some sort of, I think, ad hoc sort of look at the students who don't do well in the accelerated class, because we accelerate almost everybody, in the 8th grade for algebra, how that impacts their performance in later years in math. So we really need to look at the numbers, that those who passed but did not do well, is that a consistent line when they hit geometry and algebra 2 because they haven't gotten the foundation, or they were just not ready to take algebra in 8th grade? I mean, and I said this from the start when we first started doing this, and my daughter was one of the first classes that did this, that some students are not developmentally ready to take algebra in 8th grade, and that there are students that need 8th grade math. And I know we have a small percentage that we do now accommodate, which we never did before, but I would say that if you probably looked at it in a broader scope and track those numbers, that you might find there are more students that really need 8th grade math, and that additional year for their minds to mature and to get ready for 9th grade math.
So how do we, and I think Tim was pointing at this too, just how do we decide if we're putting kids right, how do we decide? Other districts are drawing the line differently or doing things differently, and just how do we decide if we've done a good job of that or not?
So we'll look at the,
I mean, and I'm open to it moving in any direction, right? Too much, too little, whatever it is.
so we'll look at the efficacy of the current state of the 8th grade algebra program, both on entry into, on success within, and then what medium and long-term implications does that have for students, right? So are they staying, if they start in Algebra 1, are they getting to Calc BC, right?
It's sort of like, in some sense, we do have sort of a focus in this discussion on algebra, but in some sense a larger cohort study, like at
Well,
what
sure,
point do
right.
kids drop out of math and why?
Right, so
regardless of the when and why.
Right, so we'll know that by the number of credits that they have, right? So if you have a certain number of credits, we know, and then we can dig into that a little bit more. But also, I would like to see our students surveyed as well. So not only
Great.
surveying parents, but we could actually ask students about their experience in mathematics.
And my only other point was I was going to say, I'd be very interested in what our STAR data tells us, because at this point, we've got, on some kids in some grades, we've got years of it, and I believe we have positive feelings about the reliability of that data, and I think in your reference letter, you might have even referenced sort of expanding maybe how we're using STAR, I can't remember. So I'd be interested in that data.
So we'll be extending that into the middle school. And so by the time of this report, we'll have 2 universal screenings through 8th grade as well.
That's interesting to see.
I agree.
Particularly since we always look at the state 3 through 8 tests, which we don't feel great about, and we have the opt-out rate in, and no one's opting out of this 20-minute, like, adaptive online thing.
They are not. And they're,
No.
it's not a secret.
Because, no, it's, right, we feel fine about it. It takes 20 minutes, it doesn't take.
Exactly. All right, anything else?
I think Trustee Letmore has indicated with his glasses he'd like to.
They're attached to my hand. So, piggybacking up what you said, I think it would be helpful for us to see from the K through 12 progression how the various curricula fit together. We're purchasing a new math program tonight, or at least authorizing this methodology for kindergarten to start everyone off. I'd like to see how that feeds into Singapore math and how Singapore math feeds into the other methods by which we're teaching higher levels as we go. I think that would be good, even just as a wash from the beginning. And as part of that, not a focus, but it's something I thought you should mention, is that's different for a lot of parents. And so I'm curious how those parent academies have worked, and if we think
how to support
that's
parents.
working. I would like to see an eye on the equity piece as we look at all this data, and make sure we look at how, when we look at data in the groups, how our various constituencies are performing. And finally, I know we talk about this with a lot of these studies, but even if we just gave it a shot, I'd like to know how our recent graduates are faring at college level math. I'd like to know if we prepared them well. And if we got a survey out early and even mailed it to their parents' house and just said, wait for your kid to come home for the holidays, and got some info, I think that might be helpful.
Might be interesting. To Dave's point on those progressions, I've been sort of interested in a while in how the Singapore math is feeding into our algebra curriculum.
All right, so that K-12 articulation of the.
Did we
math-
give you enough? Are you asking for more?
No, I'm not,
Yeah,
but,
oh,
no,
okay.
but I just want to,
Chris is busy typing over there.
but I want to be clear that we give you what you want, right? So, really looking at the K-12 articulation strand, right? How does
Right,
everything,
because
how
we
does
feel like there's some
everything,
big transition points in it too, right?
right? So how does everything, yes, I understand. How does everything connect to one another? There.
Trustees, looking forward to the math discussion. They're happy.
Okay, very good. I like
I
when
have
you're
math
happy.
anxiety, but I'll show up for that meeting,
Thank you.
I promise.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
That's the end of our discussion, which brings us to comments from the public. If there's anyone here who has questions or comments for the board, we welcome you. If you would come to the podium and give us your name and town of residence, we're happy to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Peter Leota. I have 3 kids that went to North Shore, two that have graduated already, and my little guy is a freshman. I've been living in the district for 15 years. My wife's family's been in Seacliff for the past probably 100 years, so her grandparents graduated from Seacliff High School before North Shore existed, to show you the roots. Just a couple of questions. For a bunch of years since I've been around here, I've been heavily involved with the sports. I've coached many years with Tom Kaufman with the PAL Youth Lacrosse. I've coached football down in Glen Cove, the youth football, which a lot of kids from the North Shore District have participated down there, and we've coached them for about 10 years. There's been a lot of talk about getting lights at the turf. And I was just curious to know, over the years, they kept, it's going to happen, but it's never come to light. No pun intended. But so my thing is just, I'm just curious to know, what can we do to try to get this going? For example, Glen Cove and North Shore had a football game 2 weeks ago, I think it was, down in Glen Cove. And I got to tell you, it was on a Friday night, and the atmosphere was awesome. If you weren't at the game, you can go to Varsity Media, go to YouTube it, and you could see the game. There was probably, on a conservative, between 150 to 250, maybe 300 kids from North Shore on the sidelines at the game. And it was an unbelievable experience. Crosstown rivals, and there was not one incident. And it was just an unbelievable experience. And I just wish that in this community we could experience that, not just for the football, but for field hockey, for soccer, for whatever sports they play, for track. It could be anything. And just experience that at North Shore. And I'm telling you, it would bring the community, and it'd be good for the youth programs to come up there. And listen, I understand that you'll never get a full 100% compliance with people. Someone's always going to complain about something. I get that. I'm a fireman for a living. I'm also a volunteer. I volunteered for 30 years. I still do. And I got to tell you something. In the volunteer fire department, when someone moves next door to the fire department, when they first move in, they complain about something. And we'll meet with the town, we'll meet with the residents, because we got to do the right thing, right? And they'll say, the truck's backing up, make the beeping noise, it wakes us up in the middle of the night. The garage door's closed, it's too loud. The lights wake us up. And so we turn around and say, we've been there for 150 years. What did you expect when you moved next to the fire department, right? So when people live next to a school, tell me what they expect from the school. Now, it's like anything else in life, right? You have to have rules, and you have to have guidelines, and you have to adhere to that to be sensitive to the community around you. But for the most part, if people live next to a school, tell me what you expect living next to a school, right? I go to a lot of sporting events, and I've been to a lot around here. I go on the South Shore, I see all the community. I went to Seaford High School. If you ever been to Seaford High School, they have lights there at Seaford High School. It's flat, there's really no hills over there, and there's houses surrounding all of it, and the lights light up everything over there. And I've seen it. I've been to Plain Edge High School, and I will take people there, I'll take the board there, has probably the state-of-the-art facility right now, Plain Edge High School. And they have what they call these new LED lights, okay? And how much they're called light infusers. And it's a light with a giant cone on it, and all it does is just shine down where it's supposed to shine down. The older lights like in Seaford or in Glen Cove, it's the older lights that shine up like this, and it shines everything around that's unnecessarily need to be lit up, like people's houses or the trees, stuff like that, where you don't need that. The lights have progressed so far in advance now, they're only intended for what the purpose is for. And I think that's something in the district that we can go for and have a sense of community pride and be fun and just energetic. It's just an awesome experience. And a lot of districts, I don't know too many districts that don't have lights anymore. Pretty much the majority of districts do have lights. And I just think that for us to go forward, it's just a great thing of community spirit and everything else. I'm lost for words. I don't know what to say anymore, but I think it'd be a great thing. I'm just curious to know how come we haven't experienced that to where I know it's a sensitive topic with the residents around there, and I get that, but when are you ever going to have full compliance with anything you do?
Thank you. Dr. Giarrizzo, I think, do you want to talk about the history of the lights and where we are and what you've been thinking?
I can. Does the board have anything? No? Okay, so history of, how are you?
Good.
So I have not been here 100 years.
I got you.
Been here like 5 minutes, but, yeah.
All good.
More like 28 months or so, right?
But who's counting?
But who's counting, right? Anyhow, the history of the light discussion here, I think, to your point, has been long, right? So it's come up for whatever reasons over the course of time. It's been decided not to move forward. When the track was done, the conduit was placed down at the stadium. So in the event that a future board decided to install lighting, that they could. And so over it is an expensive project to do. We explored it through the course of the bond that we have this year. The cost to light the field was about $1 million. We had it in the scope, and then it was taken out of the scope through the board's discussion. There is I've been trying to, for some of the reasons that you described, right?
I mean, well, many things
Right.
came out of the scope, like,
Right.
as many things as left in
Oh,
came
yeah, yeah,
out,
yes,
but I'm like,
yes.
it was one of the things.
Right, we started with $80 million worth of projects, and we landed at 39.9, right? So there were lots of things that came out. There is a fear of or concern for being a good neighbor and having light spread and noise and what happens at some of these events. I think the positives are there, right, for it. I really do. I think that there might be an opportunity for us to think about how to do it in a pilot, maybe give it a shot. And so I've spoken with John Hall and I've spoken with Don Lang, And we want to do some research on, is there a path forward for us to maybe rent lights next year for a game or two and see how it works. And then if it works, we, figure out, is there a long-term plan or not? If it doesn't work, we at least have some information to go with. So I've done nothing more than think through what could be, but I haven't committed to anything yet. And certainly, I'd want to talk with the board about that some more through the budget process. We don't even know what it would cost to rent them, or who rents them. You know what I mean?
Well, just if I can interject, so the cost is probably minimal to rent. Anyone can rent light towers and bring them there. You get a company come in,
Right.
rental, they come in, you may say like 10 around the track, whatever it is. I just don't understand that, because I'm trying to understand is that, what's the fear? Like, you talk about, you said that you worry about stuff like you want to do it on a pilot program to see if it works out, but like, are you worried about kids fighting, or are you worried about like?
I don't.
I think you were in part trying to say, like, we also heard positive things about the Friday night game at Glen
It was
Cove.
unbelievable, right.
And so, right, could that happen here? But you would sort of want to know that, yes, it would be like that here before you invested the $1 million. So I think you were just trying to think through how to have proof of the concept.
Right,
Because we're open to what you're saying.
No, I understand it.
right?
So
It's
I
just
think what's
it's
frustrating because there's a lot of support for this, and I think what's frustrating about it on our end is that majority of the school districts have this, and you know what? You don't really see too many incidents happening at nighttime, and they have this stuff, and a lot of places want to have Friday night lights. Listen, I was back home in my house from Glen Cove at 9:20. The lights were shut off. Like it wasn't an all night game. Started at 7. It was all, and what I'm saying to you is that it was a great experience. Like it just seems like this is a thing just dragging on. Like we're gonna do a pilot thing, which is great, but and then we'll wait another 4 or 5 more years to maybe get lights. Where I just don't see. I think the positive outweigh the negatives in this. I really do. If there was something every single time where if Glen Cove and North Shore, because they're crosstown rivals, and it was a fight every time. I mean, there was not one incident. Not one incident. And it was great to see all the kids come out to this, to support the football team or whatever. It could be the soccer, field hockey, doesn't matter what it is. But it's for everyone to use.
Absolutely.
And that's
And
the
we
biggest
agree
thing.
with you. I think we've had conversations here and there. We agree with you that the lighting technology has changed tremendously. I think that makes a big difference. And I think
Huge,
we've been
huge
slow
difference.
because the last time it was proposed, there was some really significant community opposition from the neighbors. So we've been cautious in that regard.
Right. And so like I told you, when you live next
But
to
we
the school,
agree
what do you
that
expect?
But we agree that there have been a lot of changes in the technology, and
Right.
that there are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of reasons to look at it again. So, if anyone else has comments, though, if you would if you'd come to the podium.
If I could just
Yeah, yeah.
say, I really think it's the cost that is holding the board back more than the
Right, so-
technology, because when, I remember the whole discussion with the lights, because I've been here 25 years.
Okay.
And I agree, I think we should have lights on the field,
But-
especially with the new technology. Initially, the opposition was when the field, the track was proposed by the town of Oyster Bay, and we wouldn't
Yes.
have regulation over the lights.
Yes, right.
And I think the community still has that perception in mind, because we wouldn't have control over the field or over the lights. And I don't know that the community is educated as a whole as to the new technology, and that it's different, and that they wouldn't be on all night. But I think we've had a lot of meetings on the bond, and we haven't had a lot of people showing up. So I think I understand, and I know a lot of people in the athletics. I've had friends who've gone through Glen Cove. My kids weren't athletes, but I've certainly attended athletic games. I think if this is an important component to the community, you need to figure out a way to organize that voice. You need to participate in, it's unfortunate now that the bond has been set, but in the bond process, it was on there. We even held it as an alternative, but the $1 million with the other priorities, just to come to consensus as a board, we each had to give up something, right? to get within a number that wasn't too burdensome on the community. But certainly, if this is something that's important to the community, we can't revisit it in this bond, but we could revisit it in the future as a capital reserve item. There are other ways to fund it through budgetary funding. I don't think we could come up with $1 million in 1 year, so I'm thinking more of a capital reserve project. But I think that you need to be present at the meetings and involved in the process in a continuous manner.
So that's not a problem, because like I said, I've been volunteering for 30 years, so I pretty much, that's all I do all the time, so I get that. But just one of the things that these guys talk is that I saw in the thing there that we're spending close to $6 million on redoing the lockers, $4 million at the high school and $2 million at the middle school. So when I talk to my kids, or and they're in the lockers all the time, they don't see the lockers being that bad. And so my thing is, like, if the lockers really aren't that bad, and that's a $6 million item, and you're talking about a $1 million project at the turf that the whole community can benefit from, I don't see that being a real big issue. I just, you're talking $4 million at the high school, $2 million at the middle school. And when I talk to the kids who go into these lockers, they're not saying that they're in that much disarray where they need a big facelift for $6 million total, when the lights only cost $1 million, and where the whole community could benefit from the lights.
So let me talk to the locker rooms for a second. The middle school locker rooms are in pretty rough shape.
Okay.
They really need to be taken care of. That $2 million is not in the bond. So that money was allocated what's called the capital reserve.
Okay.
Right. So
Yep.
the community established that capital reserve.
Yep.
Whenever it was established. Right. And so
3 years ago, I guess.
3 years ago or so. She's 2016. So that was with the air conditioning of the large spaces. Okay. So the funding for the middle school locker rooms is coming from the capital reserve,
Okay.
not the bond.
Okay.
Right. The high school locker rooms are coming out of the bond, and you are right. That's a $4 million proposed expense, and because they're so big, right? And so it's essentially a couple of $1 million for each of for the men's and for the women's, and so there is possibly room to do that for less. Right. Once we get in
Right.
there and we look at the space and what really needs to be done, but when we're preparing for the scope of a bond, we need to make sure that we calculate for lots of different contingencies.
Unforeseen stuff, I get it.
Exactly. So when
Right.
you tear down a wall, you don't know we're not 100% sure what's going to be behind there. So there's that. They're the high school. To your point, the high school locker rooms aren't in nearly as bad shape as the middle school locker rooms. That's true. The difference for in this moment, right, is that we don't have the ability, right, in this bond scope to fund the lighting, right? So when it was a supplemental to, I think it was Trustee Russo was talking about it, right? So when it was a supplemental project that was identified, if we had found some savings in the work, the board could then have a discussion and then determine, let's bring the lighting back into the mix. And so because of the scope of the projects and desire, a desire to do it a different way, it was dropped from the supplemental list, right? And so that's what happened. It was the board had a discussion about it in public on the 8th of August.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I'll let someone else
You're
talk,
welcome.
but thank you for your time.
Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Lavoti. I'm actually supporting Peter Leota. I've been in this district since 1976. I graduated Seacliff School, went through the middle school, went through the high school, and on. I brought my family back because the way the community is towards family and kids. Yes, athletics is very important. I had the benefit of coaching Mrs. Russo's son. I've done work with a lot of the kids in the community as well. My sons have benefited from the athletic department and are now doing very well in college because of that. I do feel like the program currently isn't as important as it used to be. When it comes to the lights, it's more of the community than just the sport. I feel like the community has been separated a little bit, whether it's because of athleticism or the athletic department not as fulfilled or structured as it used to be. It comes down to people wanting to use the track till 9 o'clock at night, walk the track at night. A lot of conversations around that as well. So it's not just for the athletic part of it, it's for the community to use. So yes, there is a voice out there. I agree there's only 6 or 7 of us here, but we're here for that community voice. So when you say we need to attend more, this has been going on since 1987 when I graduated. We wanted lights there. So when you say that they kind of look at it, it's not in the budget, it should have been a long time ago. So I know the locker rooms were done maybe 15, 20 years ago. Where's the need in the high school to have it done again? You know, the lights are just as important for the community and the kids to stay out a little bit later, not hang out at 7-Eleven, you know, walk the tracks, play football at night, you know, or soccer, get the community more involved. My kids walk the streets because they have nothing to do. If there were lights there to 9:30 at night for activities, just like you said, every other school, I would be so happy. I'd be more willing to go out there and stay with them and be out in the community. So look at it that more than just the sporting event. So I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is John Grinelli. I live on Plymouth Drive South, which is right behind the high school. And I could tell you that, you know, no one came knocking on my door asking me about how they felt about the lights a few years ago. And they said everybody, and we spoke to the residents. And I could tell you that at least a half a dozen of my other residents, nobody came to them. So I'm a little bit unclear about. And like Joe said, and Pete, this would be a wonderful thing for the community. And, you know, you have the other schools doing it. You know, I was even thinking about, how about after school, right? After school, these kids, sometimes right after school, they go into games right away. Come home, do their homework, they're tired. How about coming home, doing your homework, and then going to a game at night? You know, I bet you a lot of these kids' grades will be affected in a positive way that way. Just a thought. Joe was right when he said that a lot of these kids don't know what to do with themselves, no place to go. And having a field lit up there where they can play sports and other things, other events, maybe even some events that could bring money into the district. You know, there's a lot of positive things. And you know, I did some research also, and I know that a lot of schools in New Jersey did this, and I saw the cost at $500,000 to $600,000. So is the $1 million there? Is the $1 million assuming that it's not wired? Because it is wired, isn't it?
It's wired. Yes,
Right.
Yes, it is wired.
Yeah. So listen, we appreciate your time. We really care about the kids in the community, and the other districts have this. We should really consider it, and it would be great for the children, and for the parents also, and for the community. So thank you very much.
All right, you could even do outdoor concerts on it too. Outdoor music. You do music out there, right?
Hey, how are you? My name is Tom Calvin. I have a 9th grader and a 4th grader. I've been I was the director of the PAL lacrosse program in town for a number of years. And just one quick question I have, because there's certainly I hear what you're saying about, you know, there's been committee after committee, and this is almost like, to talk about it now, it's the end of the process for this. What's a realistic timetable that we can go back to the groups that say we need lights, and if people want to get to work and get them, what's a realistic timetable with the capital capital reserve fund or the next bond or something. So people kind of have an end game, because I think what happens is it's intimidating when you see the bureaucracy. You know, I'm a teacher, so I kind of understand it, but it's intimidating. So what's realistic to say to people, hey, do you want to get this now? Is it realistic to ninth grade parents to say, you know what, we might be able to get this by their junior year, their sophomore year, their senior year? Is it, for ninth grade parents, is it too late? Is this something, you know, what do you think is realistic?
It's a very good question.
You would have to create a new capital reserve to begin with, because once a capital reserve is set, you can't add new projects to the capital reserve.
But you can establish.
But you can establish, there's no reason why you couldn't establish a new capital reserve, but you would have to have enough money to fund your existing capital projects that you've already had approved, and then money to fund the reserve. So it would really depend on what we had in terms of fund balance, and how far are we out in funding? We still have items in our existing capital reserve to fund, right?
I'm just looking at it as we speak, yes.
So once we establish a capital reserve, we have to put the money in it, and that happens at the end of the fiscal year with the fund balance, right? We allocate what's going back into the tax levy, what's going into the capital reserve funds or other needs.
We do have about $1.6 million in it, and we are also going to fund it this year. But that is the monies that have been allocated for the middle school locker room and the nurses' suite at Glen Head. We still have projects right here listed that we have to complete.
So I think the simple, so in terms of what's like a realistic timeline to get it in motion?
Yeah, if the support is there and
Yep.
people are engaged,
So
what's realistic?
So the next step would be, you know, the board would have to have a discussion about whether or not they want to move forward with that. Establishing a capital reserve for the purpose of lighting or athletic things. I mean, there are other things that we would probably want to put in that capital reserve that we want to think through. That the sort of the next logical time to do that, reasonable time would probably be, because it would require a proposition to present to the voters, is probably May.
Yeah.
Right? And then once that is created, then we close our books in the summer, essentially. So our fiscal year is July 1 through June 30.
Yeah.
So come June 30, we close our books. We then look at what kind of fund balance we have, and then we have to make decisions about where to fund money. So we do have this capital reserve that Olivia talked about. If we had a second capital reserve, we would just make some decisions about how to fund two separate capital reserves and other things that we have in the budget. So, you know, depending on how that would go, what direction the board wanted to provide to, because the board directs, we make recommendations obviously to the board on where the funding goes. But if they were to say to us, we want you to make this a priority and accelerate this or accelerate that and whatever, that's how those things get funded. Once the capital reserve is fully funded, so for example, the capital reserve that Olivia was just talking to you about, anytime you want to take money out of it, even though you need voter authorization to create it, you also need voter authorization to take the money out. Okay, so let's say it gets created, we have a great year, we fund it in a year, let's just say, right? We would then need to have a public vote for the community to say, yes, you may take the money out, and then there would be the state approval process. So some of it is it's hard to say, but that is sort of the sequence of events. First, you create the reserve fund, then you have to fund the reserve fund, then you have to get voter authorization to take it out, and then you have to design the project and do the work.
So,
right?
which makes sense. Now, my question then, and perhaps this might be better just to have, sort of more of an informal conversation. What would be a logical first step? Because, I'm informally kind of reporting back to people. This is all anecdotally. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody beyond myself. But people kind of come to me because I've been the director of a bunch of organizations. And we definitely have a handful of people who are willing to step up and put that time in. What would be in a logical next place for these people to go? What committee? Where to get lights?
Why don't we get a group of folks together to come meet with me?
Okay.
And we'll get on my calendar.
Okay.
And we'll talk about what's on your mind, and I can then bring that information back to the board.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Reasonable?
Yeah. Yes.
You're welcome.
I'd like to respond to a number of things. The decision to drop the lights was an option to, instead of having the lights, we were going to have air conditioning in classrooms. That was our initial discussion. And I think that we all felt.
Given that choice, I
Given
have
that
to.
choice.
Yeah. Teaching in non-air conditioned rooms. Yeah.
I spent 25 years of my professional life being an athletics director.
Yeah.
So I've been in this environment a whole lot.
Yeah.
After I retired, I spent 5 years running the venues for high school playoff games at Hofstra Bellflower. So I know the excitement with which everybody speaks. The decision several years ago was really based on the fact that the town of Oyster Bay was going to give us some additional funding. And so I think there were a number of people who felt this wasn't our own, this was no way to control it.
Yeah.
I personally, I know my history,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? I have concerns about this. I happen to live in that community, and I love on Saturday mornings when I get a band going and everything going. If we build a field with lights, I don't only want a football team on it, I want a soccer team on it, I want a field hockey team on it, I want girls and boys soccer, I want every sport that we can play on that field. So during the course of the season, that field could be used, not on a Friday night, but 5-6 times a week. I think that's a legitimate concern that some people have.
Yeah.
So I think that you have to look at the whole picture that way. Having also been involved in that, and I'm not saying there are plenty of wonderful experiences that go on, but I can tell you from my own experience, the incidences of alcohol and drug problems significantly increase when you give my kids an opportunity to go home first and then come back to the game. So all of those things disturb me.
Yeah.
And I think when you're talking about putting out $1 million, let's work backwards. Let's see how we're going to address the concerns of the community. What kind of lighting? Where are the speakers? Is it every night? Then does the PAL want to use the field? So on top of that, we have community groups, and I can understand that community groups being upset saying, what do you mean I can't use the field? Of course I can use the field, I pay taxes. So there's so many issues to be worked out. But I give you my commitment that I will work with you and talk about each one of those issues, because I think there are a lot of things. It's a wonderful thing. I think there are potentially significant problems that need to be addressed, and everybody needs to be aware of those things right from the get-go.
I hear all your concerns, and I think, I'm speaking more, on the youth level. I think who you heard, the other people who spoke are speaking, for the high school teams. And as you said, all the teams. I still have, little guys, a little guy. And certainly the PAL and soccer, men's soccer, women's soccer, and youth soccer want that. So I think, it might actually, perhaps, it could be an opportunity for us to work together, because I know, we're all, calling Margie in the athletic office jockeying for field time. But I think if you, kind of open up a conversation right now, and I think we're at a point with soccer, with lacrosse, with baseball, where enough of the leadership enough of the leaders are starting to work together as opposed to constantly competing against each other. If we kind of had a conversation early on and said, look, we want to, rally the troops and, jump into this project, what's the reality then? Does lacrosse get it every night? Does soccer get it every night? Then there's the concern of, okay, then you're going to have kids going home. Is there going to be this? Is it going to be drugs? How's it going to impact security, safety, all of those things? That's absolutely. But I do think there's also the potential for, if you have a conversation and get the right people involved early on, that it really could kind of be a community building thing. If people are involved early on. So, I'll reach out to you guys.
Tom, can I ask you a question? Everyone was very articulate about sort of just the value of a lit field and at night. But this conversation made me want to ask also, is part of the argument just the need for more field space in general? And so the lights give us that just because you get more hours out of the field?
My personal experience is that, for example, early on in lacrosse season, and again, I'm super lacrosse centric, and I recognize that. Early on for the first month and a half of the season, we have to, we kind of have like a 45-minute window because the varsity programs go until 6:15, and then, it gets dark at like 7. So we have to rent space indoors, and then that requires us to go to Glen Cove, and then all of a sudden you're taking your little third graders to Glen Cove, and it just adds a layer, and that's $150 an hour, $200 an hour, and all of a sudden we're saying perhaps we'd rather pay that money in an extra tax here, because you're kind of getting taxed wherever it goes. I think it would provide more flexibility for all the sports. Men's soccer, for example, I see them going out this weekend. I see them going out. I see the co-ed adult soccer. They're oftentimes competing with our little, third and fourth graders, whereas the adults, they would rather go later, because they're getting home from work, and they would be able to utilize that, which would, open up. And that said, I also think part of the conversation is, okay, is it almost like if you build a highway, does that mean just more cars come? And you have to have that conversation. That I get. But I think there are enough models, and, I think what Peter was saying, I mean, a good majority of the surrounding communities have lights where we could communicate with them and say, all right, what are the issues? Have you addressed this? Have you seen these? And kind of,
We need a plan.
Yeah.
We need a plan before we go to the place again.
Yes.
It shouldn't be the other way around. And
We need a
that's my fear.
plan about
Yeah.
And that,
how much space we need.
Yeah. Well, I'd be happy to, be involved in these conversations. I'll reach out to you and then get, a few people together. I think, I already have a number of people, across the board, on the boys' side, on the girls' side, some parents who have kids who are really in pre-K up to like 2, and then myself is like 3rd and 4th through 9th, and then I think we have, 9th through 12th, and then we also have, adults who are, lacrosse, soccer, who are at that level as well, who are, using the facilities. So,
So let's get a representative group of folks together, and you'll come
Yeah.
in, and we'll have a discussion about it.
All right.
That'd be great.
Sounds good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public? Okay, we're going to close public comment and move on. Trustees, the first action, and thank you guys again for coming. We appreciate your time. Have a good night. The first action is action B, which is personnel. Do I have to make a motion first and then make the motion to amend it in the discussion? Or can I just make the motion to amend to begin with? I think I just make the motion to be amended. Okay? Right. I need to make a motion to amend on page 2 under approval of the teacher overage. Nicole DeVersa is listed, the effective date is listed as 10/2/19. I need to make a motion to amend that to 9/1/19 because apparently that's true. Do I have a second on my motion? Thank you. All in favor of the motion to amend? Okay, and then I'm still going to make a motion on
Yes, you should.
the whole. So I'm now looking for a motion on action item B as amended.
Motion.
And I have a second. All in favor? Good, thank you. Okay. Moving on to action item C, which is the acceptance of the internal claims audit report. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Questions? I had emailed Olivia earlier, that I'll share with you on that, we had 3 invoices that were, where the invoice predated the PO. They were not significant amounts of money, but it was unusual for us to have 3 of them. It was over the summer, and normally they are for extremely incidental amounts of money, so I had emailed Olivia to see if there was an underlying cause or theme, or if it was
Yes. One of them was dated incorrectly by the claims auditor. It should have been 8/17/9/18. It was last year's purchase order.
Okay.
She made a mistake on her report.
Okay.
The other 2 were 90 days late, and it's because one of them actually went to CCLIF. One of the invoices went to CCLIF, and by the time we got it, it was, more than 90 days old. And the other one was very similar. We did not receive the invoice. Some of the vendors just email you the invoice, and if you don't track it very well, you don't know that you got it. So usually we have to go back to them and tell them to give us the invoices. So there was actually no problem if you look at all 3.
Thank you. Are there other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Action item D is the appointment of a legislative action committee member. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
I have a second. All in favor? Thank you. Action item E is the approval with Navraki Smith, which is our new internal auditor. So I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Questions? All in favor? Thank you. Action F, approval to dispose of inventory. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second. Questions? All in favor? Thank you. Action G is the approval of the agreement between North Shore and the Teachers College at Columbia for professional development. Do I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Questions?
I
Trustee?
just have my usual comment that I make every year about this, that every year I get told we're going to be spending less on Columbia's Teachers College, and here we are again with another $84,000 that we're approving, and we haven't actually reviewed the literacy report on literacy, which we're getting, I guess we're going to have at the next meeting. And I'm concerned about the amount of money that has been spent on Columbia's Teachers College and continues to be spent on Columbia's Teachers College. It's a very costly program, and I don't know what other professional development is suffering because we are spending so much time on this program, and we still haven't addressed the grammar issue, because one of the shortcomings that we know about Columbia's Teachers College is the grammar. So I want to know what we're doing about grammar.
Do you want to speak to that?
So when it comes to grammar in particular, that is something that you'll see in the literacy review report on the 24th, for sure. I think there's a general consensus agreement that that is something that Teachers College tries to handle grammar in terms of how it's integrated into the reading and writing units. But I think there's an understanding now that that has to be built into the curriculum units separately. So I think we'll start to see more progress on that. Overall, in terms of the comprehensive literacy work systemically from K through 8, where we've been using the units, we have seen a lot of student growth in terms of the standardized test achievement, also on the internal assessments. But no program is totally 100% holistic. I do think any program, whether it's a math program or a literacy program, we have to control it, we have to own it, and adopt it in a way that makes sense to the needs of the students and what we're seeing, and are monitoring it. And And I'd say the same for the staff developers as well. When they come in to North Shore, we make it very clear what our needs are, what we expect from them, and what we need from them. The only other thing I do want to say about the staff development is that beyond the actual staff developers coming to each school, it includes the full package of resources, of electronic materials, of the latest units every year that we get, and also coaching institutes, lead teacher institutes. So when you purchase the staff development package, that's what makes you a TC Project school and includes the comprehensive umbrella of services. The one thing that Mr. Klobicki did take out for this year's budget was the calendar days, the principal days, other staff development where we went to Teachers College, given how much they're coming to us. So that was his beginning, and I'm going to continue to look at that where we can.
That was going to be my other question about the cost, because it's very expensive for us, because we've paid to have teachers in here in the summer. And even if we're not paying for them to be in here in the summer, then we're paying for substitutes, and they're out of their classrooms. And that's a real concern about teachers being out of their classrooms to do the professional development. But there's also the concern about the reiterative process of Teachers College, that when the students hit the high school, that they're not used to actually doing a kind of essay in a test format, where it's a timed essay, you don't get to redo it with commentary. So I don't know if we looked at, I ask this every year, have we looked at other options other than TC? I know we've done the coaching. Is there more of it that we could do internally to reduce the cost? It's just, I know, and then I'll be told there's a grant. I know there's a grant, but we don't have to use it for the TC workshop. So it's a lot of money.
Do we have other questions, or sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just, what I was going to say was the Teachers College support that we receive, right, is through the Readers and Writers Workshop, right? That's the framework that we use, which is, and we'll talk about this through the literacy review, but it is a best practice in the teaching of reading and writing in K through 8. How this is broken out over the course of time, and to Chris's point, rather than sending teachers to Columbia, there is a lot of value in having the staff developers come to us. So we have 5 days for K through 2, and 5 per building, 5 days per building for grades 3 through 5, and 5 days total for grades 6 through 8. So for our K through 2 students, it's a total of $36,000. For grades 3 through 5 students, it's $36,000, and for 6 through 8 teachers and students, it's $12,000. So the aggregate number of the 84,000 is a big number, but when you disaggregate that into how it's being utilized, it's a little bit more manageable. That said, we want to, every year we want to make sure that our PD matches our needs, and if there is an opportunity for us to reduce those numbers over the course of time, we will certainly make that recommendation without having to compromise the fidelity of the work that we are seeking to accomplish in supporting the teachers here in the classrooms with students.
Chris, I was going to ask, we did add some things at the elementary level, wordly wise, and some more explicit instructional materials already, yes?
That's correct. So Words Their Way is the vocabulary grammar program for grades 3 through 5 that is there to supplement what the TC program might not offer. Very low cost, very user friendly. Some classes at 5th grade are using Wordly Wise, which is even more specific. There's a debate about how you teach vocabulary and grammar. Do you do it in the context of reading, or do you do it separated out? I take a holistic view, just looking at the research and looking at the 6 through 12 progression. A lot of that's dependent on the family that students come from, what they're exposed to outside of school. And so one approach might work for one, one might not work for the other. But, you know, vocabulary and grammar are so important because they're codes of power. You know, you think about when children into older students write, when they're speaking, going on interviews, going to college after North Shore, that is such a marker for how they're viewed in the world. So we definitely see that as tremendously important, and we'll continue to supplement. I think, you know, to the point of how do we then continue to supplement into the middle school as well, and then into formal, proper writing in time situations. One other piece on that is the work that Julie Ritter and Seth Gordon are doing in more structured, formalized writing in the humanities as well. And I'm hoping in the achievement reports they'll speak to that too.
I could tell you, I spent a boatload of money in ACT prep, and it was focused on grammar. And I will tell you that my children told me the only grammar they learned at North Shore was in Latin class. So we really need to do something. I represent an order of retired nuns. I'm happy to bring one or two here. I'm pretty sure they could teach all of you, including our staff, how to diagram a sentence.
Oh my God, I love diagramming.
I love diagramming sentences. But if I hear one more student get up here and say me and my friend, I'm going to have a coronary. You will be wheeling me out, especially when we're spending $84,000 to $160,000 a year on a program.
Does anyone else have feelings about action item G before we vote? All in favor? Thank you. Action H, I hate to say, is approval of an agreement on more curriculum methodology. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Questions or concerns? This is a kindergarten program that we think will lead into Singapore better. All right, all in favor? It's really... action item I is the agreement between North Shore and Roslyn. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second. All in favor? Action J is the agreement between North Shore and Family and Children's Association. I believe in your board packets we were missing Appendix A on this item.
Correct.
Which we followed up on, and it's the fee schedule that's missing, which is why we're bringing it up.
Right.
And we have it. Okay.
So Exhibit A refers to a single student, so that,
Wait, are you on J or have you moved on to L?
this is J.
Okay, it refers to a single student, but it's about the missing fee schedule.
Oh, thank you, sorry. All right, so J, yes, so the original contract we had a handwritten $100 per day, and that did not make it into the contract. We revised that in the Dropbox, and so now it is absolutely correct. The hourly rate is $100 per hour.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's what we're voting
Ahead
on.
of myself on L.
I know, it was complicated that they were both missing an appendix. Do I have a motion on action J?
Motion.
Second? Second. Further questions? All in favor? Thank you. Action K is the agreement between North Shore and Seeds of the Willistons. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Second. Questions? All in favor? Action Action L is the other item. The agreement between North Shore and Family Pediatric Home Care was also missing Appendix A, in which a specific student or students were to be named. We now have it. I mean, I don't have it.
You don't have it. But there was, that contract is, that the Exhibit A names one student. It also allows us to work with other students, but we wouldn't give to protect the student's confidentiality, we would not.
Right, but we now have the exhibit at least, even though obviously we've redacted
Correct.
names.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
A second?
Second.
Further questions? All in favor? Thank you. And I'd like to make a motion to table action item M. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Thank you. We're moving on to N, which is board committee reports. Does anyone want to take construction, which we just had? Don't all
I
jump
can
at
tell you.
once.
I'll-
Please.
So, we had a meeting of the Construction Steering Committee on Tuesday. I'm doing this from memory. I didn't bring my notes with me, shame on me, but we had a meeting on Tuesday, and we went over existing items that were being closed out and finished out. The bond items from the prior bond have been finished. We're planning for some of the capital reserve projects that will be hopefully occurring this summer once we get SED approval. One of the items that might interest the board was we're talking about how are we going to repurpose the Victorian House, and in conjunction with how we utilize the one-room schoolhouse, and what the possibilities are for that. So we'll be looking at that. We talked about the EPC project and about getting the energy audit moving after the appointment of the contractor to do the energy audit. We talked about the front entrance at the high school, and that we're laying the wiring for the sign there, and that is going to be hopefully done before I hit 90, and hopefully this summer, since I've been talking about that one for 6 years too. And we talked about the bond and the work that the bond committees and the administration has been doing in terms of the information centers, information dates, and the tours. The tours have been the buildings of the facilities have been lightly attended, and we discussed alternatives for reaching out to the community with more comprehensive information concerning the scope of the bond, the date, we talked about maybe taking an ad out in the paper concerning the bond and the bond date and the information meetings, and how to better reach out to those parts of our community who is not on our email list, and how to get them on our email list. I think I pretty much got
That's
it.
pretty good. Was there something, new business?
Oh, the softball
Yes.
field. Okay, so the softball field, how could I forget that? We spent so much
You're
time
right,
on
it
it. So the softball field, we talked about the construction on the softball field. We've hit a little glitch on that. There's an issue with runoff from some streets in Seacliff going onto our field, and we are not sure if the drainage as presently designed would be sufficient to handle that, and we're looking at different ways to address that runoff before we do the actual design work for the softball field.
Yes.
Was there something else on the new business?
I don't,
Was placement a question at all, or consideration? The
Pla-
placement, changing placement of the softball field?
No, we weren't talking about changing the placement. We were talking about, I don't know if changing the placement
I'm just
would
saying
do it.
so we don't have to, that issue could take a long time to resolve. I'm just asking if we put it in another area of the field.
We didn't
property.
discuss that, but we could certainly look at that. I'm not sure, based upon the discussion and the type of the runoff, if moving the field would alleviate that concern. But it's certainly a good idea, and we could, why don't we ask the architects about it?
Is it's
You're
not
spending
happening
so
on the
much
baseball
money.
field?
Pardon?
What's that?
It's not happening, there's not, that kind of thing is not happening on the baseball field, which is at the other end of the middle school field.
The problem on the softball field is the water coming from the streets in Seacliff
Like the
and
Cross Street
rolling
and
down
down that
that sort
hill.
of cliff that we have there, you know how it's lower than the streets? So you have like a little waterfall project. We could sell tickets to the
We were
waterfall.
considering that, right.
But to defray the cost. But the problem is that unless we address this in a way that's comprehensive, I don't know if you're talking about flipping it to the other side. Maybe it would help. I don't know if that would affect the outfield, that we'd have a skating rink in the outfield, but we could certainly, we could look at it. It's a good idea. Why not?
It's interesting.
We're looking at everything else.
I agree.
It may conflict with lacrosse fields and such, but it just,
We can ask.
Right, but yeah, I don't think we thought of it, so.
Yeah, there's no harm in
Yeah,
asking, but I
let's
think
look at
that the, separately, that the flooding issue has to be resolved.
yes, okay.
Absolutely.
Or we can have an ice hockey team.
Which I
Oh,
would
yeah,
be
and the
a fan
foul
of.
ball netting. Thank you, Olivia.
Foul ball
I don't
netting.
have my notes with me. The foul ball netting
And an ice hockey team.
and the ice hockey team for the softball field. Now, the foul ball netting is being designed now.
They said because of the height, the footing would be very expensive. That's what I heard. Because of the height.
You know, I think they got cut off. I never really heard the end of that discussion. We started it, and I don't think we finished it. We got distracted.
I don't think it's concluded, right? So they know that the site civil engineer was on site, looked at it. They have to figure out how far down the footing needs to go, because they need to determine. We didn't get to a determination on the exact height of the net, what the height of the netting needed to be, and they were still working through the. Yes.
Right, so we're working that, and the traffic study came in, but we haven't looked at it yet.
The draft
just
of it.
came- The
Yeah.
draft of it just came in, and of course, when we're talking about the softball field, we would want to look at the traffic study in conjunction with any remedies that we might do to the softball field as
Correct.
well, depending on how we do the entrance to the middle school and the traffic patterns that we would adopt in connection with the traffic flows if the bond passes and the entrance to the middle school is changed down to the lower parking area.
Right.
And thus you've knit all the issues together, and that's where we are.
That's where we are.
What other committees do we have?
That might have been it.
I kind of think that is it.
That might have
Yeah.
been it.
Okay. Comments from the public?
No public.
Just checking.
It's lights out for the public.
No public.
We will move on to old business. Who has old business for us? Old business? Yes, trustee?
I'm just wondering if it concerns anyone else that our homecoming celebration is so wrapped around the football team. We talk about equity, we talk about celebrating our athletes. We go through this each year. We should be having varsity contests on our facilities from Friday to Saturday, every place, in the gym, on the fields. I remember walking into the cafeteria last year, pictures of the football team, individual pictures, no other team, no other acknowledgement. If we're going to talk about equity, let's talk about equity, and it's the same issue that occurs every single year.
Can I address the football team pictures? I want to give you the history of that and who pays for that. The football team pictures were requested by Principal Albert Cousins several years ago, probably about 8, I'd say. It was while Katie was early on in her high school career, in an effort to shore up spirit for homecoming, because we've had very poor response on homecoming. He asked Jody Cirilla and the football moms to do some decorations at the high school and to do those photos. Jody Sorella personally paid $400 out of her own pocket to put those photos up. And the football moms do that and prepare it. I agree that it would be nice if other teams participated, but either the parents have to do what the football moms did and help out, or it has to be funded through the school, or it has to come from the athletic director. Much of what happens on homecoming is really based upon the people who are volunteering. And there's no one stopping anyone else from, or any other team from volunteering or putting up photos.
I
So,
would never disagree that football parents, football moms don't do more than any other athletic parent. I would absolutely agree with you. But I'm just saying, what we are presenting to our kids and what our kids are seeing every day is one team being acknowledged for whatever reason. And if we have to fund the efforts for the other teams, then that's what we should be doing, to present ourselves as having some equity in our athletic department.
fund
I think
all the
there's
teams.
Yeah, and there's some in between, right? If more home games were scheduled with more teams over the course of that weekend, then it would be easier to get the parents of those teams involved too. So if we start with the scheduling, right, it should make it, we can move forward.
I mean, there are
And
lots,
we would like to, right?
Right,
We would
there are
like to
lots of
see
things
many,
you could
many
do.
student athletes celebrated.
you have the tennis teams, the ladies' tennis team. You could have them out there doing a little quick start. We have the equipment for little kids on the courts. You could have exhibitions. You could have,
They used to do a fun run.
right, they could have the track team out there. There, you could have many teams out there doing different events, but someone needs to organize it. So that
and we
really
have to
has
say
to
it's
come
not-
from the top.
I think the school district has a responsibility to organize that.
Right, I don't disagree with you, but that
And to
someone
start
has
with
to
the
make,
scheduling, yes?
someone has to make the effort to do that.
Yes, they do.
It does start with the scheduling, and when you're looking at the schedule, what teams have home games on a particular weekend rather than, well, I don't want to assume how the particular date is arrived at. I mean, I have my guesses, but what's that?
Your weakest.
I know, I didn't want to say that, but that was my assumption, and it should not be based on that.
Giving
It
them
should be
motivation.
based on the weekend where the most teams are playing at home and where you have Friday games and.
Right.
and
Because you can't organize parents that are in another town with their kids playing someplace else. you
Right.
know?
There can be enough manipulation in schedules where you can swap
You
home
can
and away
swap it
contests, so
around.
you can arrange that, so it becomes, homecoming becomes an event for all of our teams from Friday afternoon till Saturday.
Right. And I do think a lot of you have been saying, we would love to see that.
Right, I mean, I think we all would like to see
Yeah.
that. But I don't want to see that the football team is, you know,
We want more.
right. I don't want to take anything away from anyone.
I just want us to be conscious of the message that it sends.
Right, absolutely.
I don't want to take away anything from anybody either.
Schedule. You good?
Great.
Per week. Other old business. New business. Wait, I have a small old business. Stop arm cameras, we talked about it before. I was just going to add that the county did pass legislation saying that they were going to start looking at negotiating with school districts. And I think Peter said his quadrant is also looking at it. And school districts are supposed to be surveyed as to their interest with the stop arm
Right,
cameras.
so we haven't, we actually talked about this at a quadrant meeting today. There was no, nobody from the county has specifically reached out to any of the districts, at least in our quadrant. And there are some issues that we need to work through, like private school buses and contracted buses and who's responsible for what. And then
There are
there's,
issues.
right, and then there's issues of money and who collects that money, and so there's still a lot to sort through. Michelle Hall, our transportation director, is reaching out to local districts, to BOCES. We don't have a lot of direction yet. Once we have it, she knows, and Olivia and I have discussed this as well, that we'll be bringing forward some recommendations for the board to
It's
consider.
a little, the county did something, it's a little
Yes.
news. All right, new business. Dave, were you gonna, before I suddenly panicked about the old business, you had something?
So, recent article in the Long Island Business Journal, Long Island Business News, talked about the relationship between school boards and private development, and they editorialized that school districts should not have a say in development, despite some school districts wanting a say in development. But what occurred to me in reading that article was that when communities have large development, and this is obvious, so I should have occurred to me all along, and could get a huge influx of students in their schools, they're still constrained, of course, by the 2% tax cap. So, yes, you're expanding your base, and the expanded base would theoretically result in a lower overall per household expenditure because you're divided over a larger pool, but you're not able to get the funds to pay for the vast influx of new kids. And so we're a community that is looking at development of at least one golf course that is already in the works, one that's been sold and we don't know, and two that are certainly in trouble. There is a 60-unit development that Lisa and I are all too familiar with. There's a Lundy property. There's probably 2 or 3 others that I'm forgetting.
We think the Banffy Estate, we think.
Banffy Estate.
No, we don't know what's happening with, right?
So we, and even in our demographic report, there are people moving in, and we are potentially going to be faced with that. And so I thought it would be a good suggestion to ask LAC to look at the potential for looking at the tax cap law and looking potentially for some either exemption or relationship to new influx of people and students as a potential outlet to get around that in some way. I thought it's at least worth having LAC look at it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm interested too in the related issue of, can school districts have more of a voice with IDAs beyond just, they have to let us know that they're going to talk about it, not listen to us. Is there a way for school districts to have a voice when you're talking about these sort of town zoning and planning boards who are looking at these big developments, like
Like our neighbor Glen Cove.
at least be notified, you have to listen to us? Or more specifically, what I'm really concerned about is the fact that to me, it looks like the developers come in with projections on school-age children from their developments that are ridiculous. They're absurd. And there was a really good example with Syosset and the Syosset Park development. The developers presented numbers that said X, but Syosset went back and got Ross Haberman, who's done the demographic stuff, did very different numbers using data specifically from North Shore communities, and it had very different enrollment projections. And so the idea that most of the time, if Syosset hadn't gone out and paid and got this, that you're relying on the developers' numbers, and in Glen Cove, they looked ridiculous. That seems wrong, and none of this is going to happen unless there's legislation to say they have to listen to us, or at least have us there. And likewise, when you're talking about the conversion to pilots, you should at least be notified, right? You should at least get to say what the impact's going to be on your district, rather than just, surprise, we converted everything to pilots.
Well, you are supposed to be notified under the IDAs, not the pilots. Is
That's what I
different.
said.
Yeah.
On the IDAs,
Yeah,
you have to be notified,
you
but they don't have
be
to listen
notified.
to you, and you don't even have to be notified on the others.
You do not have to be notified.
This is all wrong.
But that lack of notification, I don't see any gray hair on Olivia, but theoretically, it could create gray hair for you, not knowing year after year when you're trying to put those calculations together. I know it's very difficult to put those things together, so I think that would be a good avenue.
I don't know if you're aware, but I think it affects Glen Cove more than it affects North Shore, but All Saints Elementary School closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one.
So there's not even an alternative for Glen Cove.
There's nothing nearby.
Locally, that's affordable.
Mhm.
Supposedly, that's going to be converted into an elite all-boys school at the elementary level, comparable to Chaminade. I think that is the plan, but right now, there's a big for rent sign on the buildings.
Maybe they could convert it to condos.
I don't think so.
I don't think.
Is it on a Superfund site? That seems to be their favorite choice of development here on the island.
Yeah, I don't know how people are buying right where the power plant was.
That site in Syosset they're talking about. I grew up there. For 40
that
years,
is-
it's been an EPA
That's
cleanup.
the wire, the
Yeah,
Cerro
the
wire.
Cerro wire,
Yes,
yeah.
that has been a big controversy. I'm sure you followed it since you grew up there, because they were talking about a mixed use initially, and there was a whole opposition because of the traffic. So, I mean, that has been a fight. It's got to be 10 years at least.
They got,
At least,
they
right?
got the residences taken.
I mean, I don't have to
They were
say-
gonna have to, like, build
say how
two
many
new wings on
decades
the
ago,
school.
but they closed an elementary school in a district, and there was a fight between closing that school versus closing another. And the argument was, if you're going to close a school, how about the one that is literally adjacent to an EPA Superfund site? But believe it or not, the parents fought to keep that school open instead because it was very convenient. So there you go.
Where they hide behind the chainsaws instead of getting in the running car. Okay, is there other?
What are we doing with that?
Oh,
It's going to LAC, is what we were saying.
Oh, is that-
Since we're LAC,
okay.
I think that's what I thought we were saying.
Yep.
So what do we want to task them with?
We have LAC on the 21st. I think we should lay it out for them and ask them to do a little research in notification on IDAs and pilots from that perspective, and also look at generally.
Like zoning planning, like development stuff,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And also, it wouldn't hurt to look at, any history of exemptions or attempts to get exemptions from tax cap law and just see where that leaves us.
I think if you look at Valley Stream, they had an IDA. That was a big one that they talked about it at one of those law
Right.
conferences.
Yes, yeah, that one
I
was-
developed, and I'm cleaning out my house. I bet you I'll find that book. So that would be one to look at, because in that they had one of those IDAs, and it actually affected 2 different school districts, and it was a huge.
The homeowners' taxes like shot up. It was something crazy.
Astronomically, and they had to go back and revisit it. One of the districts it shot up astronomically. One of it wasn't as much of an impact. But I forget all the facts of it, but if they want to look at that one, I think there was a lot of litigation involving that one. I'll try and find the site to it. I know Carrie Ann worked on it, and there was another firm. There were 2 firms together.
Like Garcia.
Yes, worked on that one. So Carrie Ann would have some information for you on that.
Great. Thank you.
I talked to an attorney from Garcia works for Locust Valley.
And that actually involved lack of notification, and the notification wasn't proper that was given, because it was 2 different districts.
Interesting. Other new business?
I'd like to be included on any discussion, a future discussion about the lighting on the field.
Okay. Other new? Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All right, let's go. Thank you all.
How do you get gum off your hands?